Welcome to another edition of the Wrestling Heroes and Insiders podcast, aka The Whip Show. And right now, you're railing with the World Heavyweight Champion, Mr. Joe Walker. It's been 20 years since the first brand split in World Wrestling Entertainment. Following the Invasion pay-per-view in 2002, they split their roster into two competing brands. An exclusive roster for Raw, an exclusive roster for SmackDown. And in that 20 years, a lot of things have changed in how the brand split has been presented and how it's worked. And it's left a lot of points of discussion, some controversy. It's been a polarizing decision ever since it was made the first time. Rules about what superstars can go where when it comes to appearing on each brand, the brand versus brand matches and pay-per-views, how they've done Survivor Series since with the brand versus brand matches for brand supremacy. And also what happens with the champions, factions, tag teams, and most importantly, all of the titles. Currently, World Wrestling Entertainment has the WWE Unified Universal Champion, if I said that correctly, the Intercontinental Champion, the United States Champion, two Women's World Champions, the Raw Women's World Champion, the SmackDown Women's Champion, the Women's Tag Team Champions, the Unified Tag Team Champions. So people tend to throw ideas around about how it should be handled. And when I sat back and thought about it for a moment, it shouldn't be as difficult anymore as it used to be. How to make it work and keep it working and effective. They have NXT now. And NXT is considered a developmental brand. And they use NXT to groom talent to bring them up to Raw and SmackDown. So I started thinking about that. And I'm like, WWE has an opportunity to create a developmental tier. You start with NXT. Your next level would be SmackDown. And then the next level would be Raw, which is the flagship 3-hour show. And you can watch professional wrestlers progress to make it up to Raw, where they would compete for the larger titles. And that way you can keep the superstars exclusive to one show until they get drafted to the next show, or they move up to the next show. Or the draft can still work, but if you're pulling that draft talent from one tier and moving them to the next, I think it will work a lot better, and you don't have to move the titles. The same thing with factions. If you have a faction that's being developed and has success on one show and you want them to move to the next one, then by all means make them available to the draft. Same thing with a tag team. Make them available to the draft and have them move together with the titles. That's what I want to touch on. Where do the titles go? Do they switch brands or do they stay? I say they stay. You have your World Heavyweight Champion. Right now, the titles are unified, the WWE Championship and the WWE Universal Championship. First of all, we don't need two world champions. One works perfectly. You keep that champion on Raw. Then you have the Intercontinental Champion. This is the championship that was next. The person who held that title, people saw that title holder as the next one in line to become the world champion. So you have your World Heavyweight Champion on Raw as the main champion, and then you have your Intercontinental Champion on SmackDown. So what about the women's titles? Do I think there needs to be two women's world champions? I don't. Should there be a second-tier women's champion? Absolutely. You have your women's world champion on Raw, and you have a second-tier champion on SmackDown. The same thing should be done with the tag teams. But since you have 2 tag team titles in the same company. You don't need 4 or 5 or however many. You don't have your main men's world tag team champions on Raw or SmackDown and have the women's world tag team champions on the opposite show, whichever show that the titles fall on. And then you could have, maybe a 4th championship, have the Cruiserweight Championship, bring that back and make that exclusive to SmackDown. Then it gives the shows a unique feel. You keep your U.S. champion on Raw. And instead of this sometimes yes, sometimes no use of the open challenge, just make that the standard of how that title is defended, because then it keeps it fresh and unique. And then you have these unique things on each show. You have the World Heavyweight Champion, the Women's World Champion, one of the tag teams, and then another singles title, the United States Champion, on Raw. On SmackDown, you have the Intercontinental Champion, a second-tier Women's Champion, again, on one of those tag teams, and then the Cruiserweight Championship, which they never should have abolished anyway. The Cruiserweight Championship, again, it makes the show unique. And then there's NXT. It gives those developmental talents something to look forward to as they move up. You have your NXT champion who's looking to be the world champion. You have your NXT women's champion who's looking to hold one of those higher ranking women's world championships. You have the 2 tag teams, the women's tag team and the men's tag team at NXT, who are looking to hold one of those other titles as they move up. And it gives them something to look forward to. The brand split can work. And then as far as having those contests where they battle one another, bring back a pay-per-view where it happens regularly once a year. The NXT Worlds Collide is a great idea. They don't have to do it at Survivor Series where they have to force these contests into existence, champion versus champion from each brand. No, do Worlds Collide. Allow some mixture between the brands where you see someone from Raw go against someone from NXT or whatever makes sense, whatever is sensible. Then you're just getting a special mix of rosters on one show. And I think that is very cool. And the Survivor Series, the Survivor Series, I'd say it again. The Survivors Series should stick to its tradition. 4-on-4 elimination matches. That's how it always was. Back when they first introduced the Survivor Series, even having a championship match at Survivor Series, I don't think that's necessary. I don't think it's necessary to have the title defenses at that pay-per-view. It should strictly be the 4 versus 4 matches. And that's it. Yeah, you'll see the brands represented. But the brands will be represented based on what the 4 versus 4 matches are. And that's the show. And I think it will work great. It worked before. It could work again. And you could have a 4 versus 4 Raw match, a 4 versus 4 SmackDown match, a 4 versus 4 NXT match, all elimination style. And you can still keep the pay-per-view the same length, but make those matches longer, make them mean more, give the fans more. Forget the quick pins and having these elimination matches that last 2-3 minutes. That doesn't give each of these matches their time, and put some of the top competitors in these matches and just let them go. That would make that pay-per-view special. And then we're not mixing. We're not doing a SmackDown. The WWE Champion versus the WWE Universal Champion, the Intercontinental Champion versus the United States Champion, and things like that. The Intercontinental title, if it was the leading title on SmackDown, it should be treated like a top tier title, Like when Ricky the Dragon Steamboat held it, and the Macho Man Randy Savage held it, and Bret the Hitman Hart, and Shawn Michaels, and Booker T, and so many others that made the title prestigious. Go back to when Ric Flair was the Intercontinental Champion. He held that title for several months. It was a great reign. It was great for him to remind people just how well of a storyteller he was in the ring. Now imagine if he was doing that on an exclusive show. He was the top guy on SmackDown, not interfering with anything that's happening with the World Championship on Raw, but on SmackDown, he's the guy. And to get to Raw, to get to a world champion, you must first go through him. And he stands as the next in line at some point to challenge the world champion because he's the Intercontinental Champion. That would be great. That would be great. We've seen the brand split for 20 years now. It can work if they commit to an idea, if they commit to a direction and follow it, create this blueprint that works well for the course of forever, and they never have to change it. Again, they have 3 dominant brands now, and they can create tiers. I personally and strongly think it would be great, and it would be exactly what's needed. Thank you for listening to Railing with the World Heavyweight Champion, Mr. Joe Walker, on the Wrestling Heroes and Insiders podcast, aka The Whip Show. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and support the platform wherever you get your podcasts from. Follow The Whip Show podcast on all social media, and follow me on Twitter at Mr. Joe Walker. No excuses. Championships only. Be kind, be creative, win.